this can't be real. That is the only thought going through my mind throughout this entire episode. This can't be real. This can't have actually happened. There's no way that all of this would... But it was. It was. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Alright. I'm Mason the Brock Henderson. This is People vs. OJ, American Crime Story, Season 1, Episode 9, Manna from Heaven. This entire episode all about the Mark Fuhrman tapes. That was it. The fact that this actually happened is just crazy. The entire thing. Not just the tapes, not just, the judge trying to decide, okay, do we do this, do we not do this, do we put them all in, do we just show certain parts? Not just that, not just the defense starting an outcry to see the tapes shown, not even just the explosions happening in the courtroom, just all of it. The fact that this happened is just crazy to me, and seeing it all take place, and I actually did some research after this episode to kind of see, okay, did this happen or did this not happen? How much of this actually did happen? Pretty much all of it. Some of it was changed around a bit. The Darden outburst with, Marcia stepping in and saying something too didn't happen like it did here. What actually happened was Faye Resnick, the blonde that wrote the book about Simpson and all that stuff, she was being questioned, and the defense was asking about, they're trying to make it seem like because she moved in with Nicole 9 days before Nicole and Ron Goldman were killed, the defense was trying to make it look like Faye Resnick was the one that was the target of the murder, and Nicole was just wrong place, wrong time. So that was kind of their line of questioning, and that's when Darden, like, they approached the bench. Darden exploded because apparently Cochran said something about they don't even know how to try a case, and that's when he just went off and said you should hold me in contempt and all that stuff. So like I said, didn't happen exactly like it did, but it still did happen. That explosion from Darden and Marcia did happen. And it's been a long time coming. It really has. I've been waiting for something like that to happen, because Cochran just keeps, it's almost like watching a little kid in a playground. Like that one little kid that just goes up behind people and pokes him in the back of the neck and runs away. Pokes him in the back of the neck and runs away. Just keeps doing that to Darden. And just keeps on pushing him, prodding him, seeing how much he can take. And finally in this one, whenever Judge Ito's, I'm going to hold you in contempt, you should hold me in contempt, and they start laughing, and Darden looks at him and is like, this is not a laughing matter. And I'm just like, exactly. Like, he really, really got serious to the point where even Cochran was like, okay, like, just, hey, calm. And he's like, don't. It was a very emotional episode. So many scenes like that, where you've got Shapiro blowing up on Cochran in the elevator. You've got Darden blowing up on Marcia in the elevator. You've got Darden blowing up in the courtroom. Marcia blowing up in the courtroom. Cochran blowing up to the media after Ito released his decision. I mean, all of this going on. So, anyway, my overall opinion of this is just, I can't believe this all happened. But let me go a little bit more specific now. A couple of the scenes that I really, really liked. Partly because the story is handled very well, but also because of the delivery of the lines and how well they put it. One scene was Darden blowing up on Marcia in the elevator. Just the wording of it. It was perfect. You wanted a black face, but you didn't want a black voice. And it's just like, stick it to her. Because, I mean, honestly, everything he said in the elevator was completely true. So I told you not to put Mark Fuhrman on the stand. I begged you not to. I told you so many times. and it's coming back to bite him now. That's kind of frustrating for him. And so he finally just lets her have it. And I think it's kind of funny because most of what Marcia says in this episode is true, but much too late. Her talking about how the defense is trying to emphasize this point of race and trying to focus the jury away from what's actually the purpose here, whether OJ did it or not. It's all true, but at this point, it's way too late to start talking like that. She apologizes to Darden, but at this point, it's way too late to apologize because it's already been done. It's already over. You can't fix it now. I really, really, really didn't like, but also did the twist on the tapes. Because at first you're listening to these tapes and you're just like, oh my gosh, like this guy is just a total moron, idiot, bastard. Every single word you can think of to describe this moron Furman, it all applies to him. But then whenever they find out he also talked bad about Ito's wife, at first I was like, oh, this is just that's it. Their cases. But then all of a sudden they start thinking, wait, we can get a mistrial for this. I like that the prosecution and the defense both realized this, but the prosecution at first was like, maybe we can get a mistrial, maybe that, but ultimately they decide, like, even though Darden was upset, I think Marcia was right in saying we can't do a mistrial, because honestly, as long as this has been going on, as long as this case went on, yeah, at this point, seeing OJ walk is very frustrating, but it's better than going through it all over again for several months and still having him walk because ultimately your main evidence no longer holds weight because it's all thrown into question now. So I think even though the defense was kind of, we can't have a mistrial, they'll win this if we have a mistrial. I don't know if they would have, because honestly, even if they don't call Mark Furman to the stand, it's not like the defense can't still bring up this whole concept of, oh, what if the LAPD did frame him, and paint a picture that the jury will bite on. So I don't know about that, but I am glad that they kind of went the sensible route and thought, we can't keep wasting our time, we can't keep wasting these people's time. Even if it does mean that we end up losing this case, we can't go for a mistrial. There's a lot of good stuff in this episode. I'm trying to make sure I touch it all. Okay, I know where I'm going next. Shapiro in this episode. It's funny how, for most of this season, I have hated Shapiro. He just seemed like a scumbag. He seemed like one of those guys that you just want to punch him in the face just by looking at him. This episode, though, they kind of painted him more in a rational light, where Cochran is very fueled by, it's all about the truth. We need to get the truth out about the racial abuse of the LAPD, and this is all about race. And Shapiro's like, look, I understand you're frustrated about this, but this is about our client right now. That's interesting to see, because the beginning of the season, you would have thought Shapiro was the farthest of all of them from what's the best for their client, because he was like, oh, let's just get a plea bargain, and that's it, we just keep plea bargaining his way out of everything. It's like, that's not what's best for your client, that's what's best for your record. You get plea bargains so you don't technically lose, but you get them the best deal possible. It's like, that's chickening your way out of it. That's finding the easiest route that makes you look good, but not necessarily helping your client. But in this one, it seems like he really is trying to focus back onto the client and not focusing about, oh, this is all about race. And I don't know. It was very interesting to see he was the one making the stand about this. And even Bailey was kind of like, oh, Bob, this it's more than just, it's not about race. He was kind of with Cochran on this, so I don't know, it's very interesting. The trip to North Carolina to get the tapes was well handled, but at the same time frustrating because we see that Cochran is not the only one who knows how to play the system. Bailey gets up and just starts talking to these North Carolina judges about, oh, how it's great to be back in Carolina and back in the state of the Tar Heels, and I'm just like, God, even he knows how to win over judges, just different judges than Cochran does. Like, still frustrating to see. And it's very, very interesting just to see how the defense is so just. It's like they've got blinders on. Like, we can't see. This isn't about the case anymore. The case is over here. Everything else is over here. It's all about. We need to make this focused on the LAPD. Framing OJ. That's what it's got to be. That's all they're focused on, and it's very funny because you think back to the beginning of this season. Okay, I'm treading on very thin ice right now. The LAPD has been shown throughout most of this season that there is some racial stereotyping going on. It's shown that time and time again. I don't know if it's still an issue now. It might be, but back then it was a big issue. It's been touched on. However, at the beginning of the season, we saw that OJ was not treated like every other black man. He was not treated like he was one of those guys. He was treated very well by the police. He comes home after running from the police for how long? The Bronco chase went on for a few days, right? Or a couple days, something like that. It went on for a while. He comes back home, and all the cops are just like, all right, what do you need, OJ? Get him his orange juice. Let him call his mom. It was very much, what do you need, man? We got. You really think about it. Cochran has painted this picture that OJ is just like every other black person. He's being set up by the police because they stereotype based on race. I was like, wait a minute. He wasn't treated this way. He was not one of those people. That's very interesting how they've managed to turn the trial so much that instead of it being, did OJ commit these murders, it's become, is the LAPD trying to frame another black man? That's become the main focus of this trial now. I can't believe they managed to do it, but they did. That is the one thing they're focusing on now. So much so that obviously the jury feels like, we not guilty. So it's crazy to see. Just having been through this entire season, having not lived through it, but having experienced it now, knowing the result didn't really matter, because what was important throughout most of the season, and obviously we have one episode left next week, but what's been important throughout this season is not the end result. Like, that's not been the focus. That's not been, oh, you already know it's going to be not guilty, so what's the point? The point is seeing it all happen, seeing everything going on, and kind of pushing it. Pushing that boundary of, pushing that motion of, this is what was going on at the time. They used it to their advantage. Watch and see how it all went downhill for the prosecution. Because it just felt like they could not catch a break. However, at the very end, I like the fact that they did this, because throughout most of this episode, it just felt like, it felt like Marcia, it felt like Christopher Darden, they just were not catching a break. It was all going downhill. Things were just going from bad to worse to even worse. And at the very end, what's her face? I guess she's an assistant that brings up this piece of paper or this little file to Marcia. She's like, "Hey, the ruling's come back." She's like, "What? Ito's already decided?" She's like, "Who's Ito?" It's like, "It's your divorce hearing." I'm just like, oh no, like, don't tell me she lost that too. Because all I could think is things are just going bad, and they're going worse, they're going even worse. This is going to be like, you can't get any lower than this. But she ends up winning primary custody. And even the lady's like, so you won everything. And that's great. I teared up a little bit. I'm like, you know what? She needed it. She really did. I could not imagine if after all of this in this episode happened, if it comes back with, oh, you lost your kids too. Like, that would be it. Like, I couldn't even imagine. I could not begin to imagine just how bad that would have been for her. Just how heartbreaking, how life-ending that would have been to lose it all. But in the end, just like that woman said, she won everything. You know, that is a very good line because it speaks to it goes beyond just, oh, you won everything in this case. That's what matters. I don't think she realized it until she held that paper in her hand that said primary custody. I don't think she realized until right then that that's what mattered. The OJ case, all that stuff, it's big, it's huge, but compared to what she just got in her hand, it's all just small potatoes. Who cares about that stuff? She just got primary custody of her kids. That's everything to her. So that's just really, really nice to see. Kind of ends the episode on a happy note, instead of ending on like all gloom and doom. Anyway, the final thing to talk about though is Furman himself. They bring him in at the end. I hate to say it, but I made this joke, and I'm gonna go ahead and say it now. They brought Mark Fuhrer in, or I don't say it very well. Fuhrer. Anyway, I'm they had all the signs of him with the little Hitler mustache and stuff, so it just popped in my head, and I'm just like, oh, I'm a terrible person. But anyway, they bring him in. Everybody in the courtroom is just giving him the death eye. Just like, it's just, even he walks by Darden and Marcia, and they're both just like, you suck. It was very intense, especially watching it like you're watching it from his point of view, and just walking into that courtroom and every single eye is on you, and it's glaring at you. And ultimately, the biggest talking point of this is before the defense goes to question him, Darden just stands up and walks out, and you can tell he does not want to hear a lick of what Mark Furman has to say. I don't blame him. I really don't, because one, he is a racist. That has been clearly shown by what he said on those tapes. So that already frustrating for Darden. But also, this man is the bane of his existence right now. The reason that his whole case fell apart is pretty much standing right in front of him. So it goes beyond just the race thing. As a prosecutor, his whole case rested upon Mark Furman's testimony about the evidence, and all that just got thrown out the window. I would walk out of frustration too. Then beyond that, and I was looking up stuff about Mark Furman while this was going on in the show. Like, I was pulling up Wikipedia just to kind of read and see where he is now, and I saw something about Fifth Amendment as that scene is happening, and sure enough, Cochran's asking him all these questions. Well, have you ever used a racial racial whatever? And he's just like, I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. Ultimately, this all leads to one final question, which is, did you plant or manufacture evidence in this case? Instead of just saying no, he pleads the fifth. And from what I read, that, and I totally understand, that becomes kind of the defense's main argument. That leaves room for their argument of the evidence could have been tampered with, because he didn't say no. If he had just said no, that's all it would have taken. That's all it would have taken, was him just saying no. And that cuts down that line of logic from the defense. They can't, obviously they could argue that, oh, he could be lying again, but they can't prove it. But they don't need to now that he pleaded the fifth. I don't know grammar that well, apparently. Anyway, but all he had to do was just say no. And now that he has said, I plead the fifth, well, now the defense is going to attack that line of logic so hard, and that's going to become the main focus of attack. Yeah, it sucks. Mark Furman is the reason why this whole case fell apart. It's funny. I was actually reading a little bit farther down on his Wikipedia page. Apparently, he blamed the two lead detectives for not handling the evidence well enough with the chain of command and all that, and then he also blamed the two prosecutors for not adequately attending to the case or something like that. I'm like, dude, really? Like, you are pretty much the main reason, for at least from what I see. Obviously, this may not be entirely accurate, so maybe there was some other stuff that they didn't really touch on that had the jury convinced one way, but from what I see, Mark Furman was pretty much the center of a lot of this. And that's just frustrating to see. The fact that one man, and like I said, I'm so glad Darden stepped up to Marcia and said something about that, because he did say, we can't put him on the stand. We cannot put him on the stand. If we put him on the stand, it's going to hurt us. And she was just like, yeah, we got this. Took it very nonchalantly and just got crushed. On the other hand, though, this is something I did want to bring up, because my mom mentioned something about it. We've been watching this show together, and I do understand this as well. Marcia kind of went in with the mindset of, this is so easy. We have all the evidence. It's a very cut and dry case. It all makes sense. We got a time frame. You can kind of understand just a little bit why she went into this case thinking, we got this. We don't have to worry. Oh, what? Don't put Mark Furman on? Please. It's okay. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. Just put him out there. I'll talk to him. We'll get through this. You can kind of understand her lax nature, but at the same time, you got to think that treat this case with proper care. Really go into it, even if it seems like it's a slam dunk. It's the same thing in sports. If you go into a game thinking, oh, we've got this one, guys, and go in, complacent, not ready to fight, there are teams that are not as good as other teams that can win just based on the fact that they came ready to play and the other team did not. That's what's happening here. There was an overwhelming amount of evidence for the prosecution, and it all ended up getting tossed out the window because they did not really treat the case with enough care. They did not really focus and crack down and make sure they had it all planned out. Whereas the defense came in thinking, okay, let's just take it to them. We've got this idea. Cochran went in with the mindset of, it's going to be about race. Even when he's talking to his wife, like, she's just like, forget OJ. He's an imperfect person. You got what you wanted to say out. And I'm just like, exactly. He didn't go into this case thinking, oh, I need to help OJ out of prison. No, it was all about race for him. And that ended up, it's funny because he didn't go in thinking, I can get OJ off. He was going in thinking, I need to make this about race. I need to make it about the LAPD being unfair to the black people, and that's it. That's all I got to do. And he did that, and that actually ended up helping his case, which is really weird how coincidental that was. But ultimately, it's also down to the prosecution not really going at it as hard as they could have. So, the final scene to talk about, though, is the scene where OJ is putting his prison clothes back on, and he's just all excited. He's like, man, did you see Johnny in there today? Like, that was just so awesome. He's got so much charisma. And Bob Kardashian is just like sitting there, and you can tell by the look on his face, he's not okay with this. And I wonder if that's going to become kind of a thing in the final episode, like if they're going to address that anymore. Because they did address it a little bit in last week's episode, where he was kind of, when he was talking to, what's her face? Kris Jenner, I think. His ex-wife, he was talking to her, and he starts just breaking down crying because he doesn't know what to believe anymore. At first, he was so set on, OJ didn't do it, he couldn't have done it, and now he doesn't know because he's been through so much with this case. It's affected him so much. I really feel bad for him. I really, really, really feel bad for him right now. Because you can tell, even though OJ's all pumped up, he's like, yeah, I'm not gonna be in these chains much longer. It's the last day I'm gonna be in these clothes. Kardashian's just sitting there going, this doesn't feel right. You can tell by the look on his face, this doesn't feel right. Now I want to take back something I said earlier in the season about David Schwimmer. I said he was probably the least, my least favorite out of all the different people because most of them felt like they were playing their role, and for David Schwimmer, it felt like he was playing Ross, but different. Just slightly different. He really has come along in the last few episodes. It's not like he still doesn't. It's not like I don't see Ross whenever he does it, but he does have very good moments in the last couple episodes where it really does feel like he is emotionally invested in this, and that's what we're supposed to get out of him. We're supposed to feel like he's confused, he doesn't know what's going on. So I just want to take back that kind of criticism earlier on in the season and say he really has done well the past couple episodes. So that's nice to see. But overall, yeah, just so much happened in this episode, and none of it felt real. It all felt so crazy and just absolutely insane that all of this happened. So anyway, those are my thoughts on it. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. Like I said, there was a lot to talk about, but I feel like I touched on everything I wanted to. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If there's anything I missed, let me know. We can talk about that as well. Leave a like and subscribe for more American Crime Story, and I'll see you at the next review. Peace out.